We begin today's show with an explosive new report that reveals the extensive influence of corporate cash in U.S. elections through third-party groups that do not have to disclose their donors. The report, published by The Guardian, is based on 1,500 leaked court documents from an investigation by Wisconsin prosecutors into possible illegal fundraising by Governor Scott Walker for the third-party group Wisconsin Club for Growth, a 501c4 organization. Prosecutors gathered hundreds of email messages that show exchanges between Walker, his top aides, conservative lobbyists, and leading Republican figures such as Karl Rove. Now Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump also appears in the files from when he met with Walker and then donated $15,000 to the Wisconsin Club for Growth. But last July, a conservative majority of Wisconsin Supreme Court halted the prosecutors' investigation before any charges were filed. They said prosecutors had misread campaign finance law and that their targets were, quote, wholly innocent of any wrongdoing. The justices also ordered that all evidence from the investigation should be destroyed, but at least one copy survived and was leaked to The Guardian.
This is how reporter Ed Pilkington begins his report. Quote, Scott Walker was under pressure. It was September 2011, and earlier that year, the first-term governor had turned himself into the poster boy of hardline Republican politics by passing the notorious Anti-Union Measure Act 10, stripping public sector unions of collective bargaining rights. Now he was under attack himself, pursued by progressive groups who planned revenge by forcing him into a recall election. His job was on the line. He asked his main fundraiser, Kate Donor, to write him a briefing note on how they could raise enough money to win the election. At 6:39 a.m. on a Wednesday, she fired off an email to Walker and his top advisors flagged red. Gentlemen, she began, here are my quick thoughts on raising money for Walker's possible recall efforts. Her advice was bold and to the point. Corporations, she said, go heavy after them to give. She continued, take Koch's money, get on a plane to Vegas and sit down with Sheldon Adelson. Ask for $1 million now. Her advice must have hit a sweet spot because money was soon pouring in from big corporations and mega-wealthy individuals from across the nation. A few months after the memo, Adelson, a Las Vegas casino magnate who Forbes estimates has a personal fortune of $26 billion, was to wire a donation of $200,000 for the cause. Adelson's generosity, like that of most of the other major donors solicited by Walker and crew, was made out not to the governor's own personal campaign committee, but to a third-party group that did not have to disclose its donors. In the world of campaign finance, the group was known as a dark money organization, as it was the recipient of a secret flow of funds that the public knew nothing about. One of the checks made out to the group for $10,000 came from a financier called G. Frederick Caston, Jr. In the subject line of the check, Caston had written in his own hand because Scott Walker asked. Well, for more, we're joined by the man who wrote those words, Ed Pilkington, chief reporter for The Guardian U.S., author of this explosive report, Scott Walker, The John Doe Files and How Corporate Cash Influences American Politics. Welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to be with you again. Ed, explain the significance of this and how you got these leaked 1,500 documents.
Well, I'm not going to discuss how I got the documents. You'll understand that. We're not talking about anything to do with sources, which is a relevant matter today because in Wisconsin they are talking about launching a leak inquiry. The Attorney General of Wisconsin has said he'll consider appointing a special prosecutor himself to go after the source of these documents. So it's a sensitive and important issue, and one we're being very clear on. We're not going to discuss anything to do with sources. But what we think we saw in these 1,500 pages of documents that we received is not only a very intense story about Wisconsin, which is a noble state with a very long tradition of very progressive politics that has become, I think, a kind of ground zero of the battles, but partisan battles between left and right ever since Scott Walker became governor in early 2011 and introduced this union-bashing law, Act 10. But it also tells us, and this is what we try to focus on at The Guardian, it tells us a much wider picture of what's happening right across the nation. which is all about, I think, the atmosphere and the environment created by Citizens United, the Supreme Court ruling of 2010, in which it seems to be that politicians, senior politicians around the country, are interpreting the ruling almost as anything goes, that they're entitled now to do pretty much anything. They can attract millions of dollars of funding from the top billionaires right across the country. They can channel it through these dark money groups, which do not have no limits on how much they can collect, do not disclose their donations to the public, and go that way in order to, what the prosecutors alleged in Wisconsin, to circumvent campaign finance law to the detriment of the public, because the public doesn't know that this stuff is going on.
And Ed Pilkington, in your story, you know not only that these justices in Wisconsin decided that there was no crime here that needed to be prosecuted, but also that they, one, ordered the destruction of the documents, and two, that some of these very justices had been reelected as a result of dark money contributions to them. That's
right. You know, once one delves into the documents and into the story, you find yourself going into sort of vortex of ever-tightening circles where everyone seems to be talking to everybody else. And again, we saw that as a sort of metaphor for what's happening across the country. We focus on one justice of Wisconsin Supreme Court called David Prosser, who's in fact just retired. But he was re-elected in 2011, and he himself drew upon the support of millions of dollars of corporate money pushed through exactly the same third-party groups that then went on at the same time to help with Republican senators and then Scott Walker himself go through their recall elections. Now, the John Doe investigation that created all this evidence that is the documents we received was looking into exactly those groups, right? The Supreme Court of Wisconsin ordered the documents in which this material is contained to be destroyed, and yet in the documents is evidence that the same groups were supporting one of those justices on the Supreme Court of Wisconsin in his own re-election. So, as I say, you find yourself going in ever-tighter circles, and you kind of wonder, you know, where is the sort of openness, where's transparency, where is the being honest with the Wisconsin public about what is going on here?
We're going to go to break and then come back to this discussion. We'll also be joined by John Nichols of The Nation in Madison, Wisconsin. These are astounding leaked documents, an explosive new report by Ed Pilkington, chief reporter for The Guardian U.S. We will link to his piece because Scott Walker asked, but we're going to talk with him further about it in a moment.